Welcome to The Secret Witch Show, the podcast providing a safe and alchemical altar space of conversations which help powerful women escape a half-hearted, spiritless society and rediscover the freedom of living a wildly magical life. Every other week, we explore how to cast aside the wounds of shame, guilt, and fear connected with fully being yourself, so you can grant yourself permission to stop hiding, ground soulfully back into your body, illuminate your whole soul desires, tend your soul, rediscover and reclaim your powerful gifts, express your magic, and manifest your wildest alchemy. There's no better place to become who your heart longs to be. This is where we will guide you into liberation. I'm your host, Nicole Barton, and I'm so excited to dive in. Welcome, magical ones. I am so glad you're here. In today's modern world, magical witches are keeping themselves small and hiding when instead they long for a life of more. They are living lives that lack their full radiance, feeling the shame of believing they are too sensitive, too dreamy, too wild and emotional, and that is keeping them secret in small lives. They feel burned out, trapped in a life of selling their souls for love, approval, security and control, and giving up their power because they lack the confidence and doubt the capacity to create lives of magic. I work with these magical women in a powerful alchemical container for you to reclaim your magnetic, medicinal, powerful self, called Invoke Your Witch Queen. This crucible guides you into the path of soul, magic and power, and I've got 2 one-to-one spaces opening up to work with me soon. In this work, I'll be guiding you through the full Live Your Wild Alchemy path to love yourself deeply enough to harness your power from love, soften and open into the vulnerability to take soulful, aligned actions, feel confident in your own skin, and create a life of magic, shining your medicinal gifts into the world, ultimately becoming the woman you came here to be. Find out more at www.nicollebarton.co.uk/work-with-me. My guest today is Adam Quiney, an executive leadership coach specialising in working with the smartest people in the room. A former software developer and attorney, Adam's learned the hard way about the costs that come from keeping your heart safe and chasing after external rewards to feel whole and complete. From love, Adam is connection, passion, presence, wit and brilliance. From fear, he is awkward, robotic, apathetic, irrelevant and arrogant. He's learned to embrace all of these parts of himself and works with others to do the same in their own lives. Living with his beautiful wife and their 2 dogs, one of which is a cat, in Victoria, he is a man on a mission to bring the world to a more inspired and fully expressed place. His soon-to-be-published book, Who Do You Think You Are?, shows people how to see the underlying light in all of us and develop that as opposed to fixing what occurs as broken on the surface. Let's dive in. Welcome, Adam. I've been so excited to record this video. I came across your brilliant work via my own soul guide, and I now use it actually with my one-to-one clients to help them kind of distill their soul's essence. So yeah, it's really, really powerful, the work that you've created, and it's also no easy feat because you've really come up with a magical way to distill someone's whole soul into, say, 5 words. So yeah, welcome and thank you for coming to share with us.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Amazing. So I thought, as we decided prior to this recording, you are an honorary King Warlock. I was curious if we could start with describing your journey from, say, Secret Witch to Warlock King via the essence work that you share now.
Sure. We're talking about my favorite subject, Adam Quiney. So if I start to take a long time, just interrupt me or steer me, okay?
Yeah, gorgeous.
So I guess I would start by distinguishing, there's sort of like the witch or the warlock, which are in my mind kind of like the wildlings. They grew up always feeling access to that magic, and consequently, they can draw on a lot of it and be really powerful with it, but sometimes they're a bit raw around the edges. And then there's the wizard, or the, maybe, I don't know, the sorceress. I'm not super up on the nomenclature, but the classically trained, in the academy. And I would say that was more my path initially. So I grew up highly logical. Computer scientist was my first career. Lawyer was my second career. The world fit in a neat, tiny box, and it was very well ordered and put together. And if you didn't fit within the confines of that box, well, don't worry. I'm going to help you shave off all of the sides and all the edges so that you do fit in the box by the end of it. And it's going to be miserable, and we're all going to go along with it because I'm very convincing. And so that was who I was about 15 years ago. And inside of that, life was like, you can imagine sort of a lawyer almost advocating for this. Life was pretty good. It wasn't bad. There wasn't that much to complain about. But underneath that, like in my heart, when I could hear it, it was like, this fucking sucks. I'm bored. And I was getting stoned all the time and just doing anything to try to, not that there's anything wrong with getting stoned, but like this was a crutch to try to feel access to something beyond the mundanity that existed for me in life. And so I started looking into coaching, thinking what I was going to do was help other people achieve the pinnacle of success my life had become, right? Let me coach you to become more like me because I figured it out. The good news is that story got knocked out of me pretty quickly. And I found my way, really fortunately, into a group of people who were really deep into their work, meaning they were taking a lot of their own medicine, as opposed to like they'd learned a lot and were just giving it to other people. And they sat down with me and they said, Adam, the package looks great. You're charming, handsome, witty, well-educated, well-dressed, all of that stuff. And it's entertaining at first when we meet you and we want to play with you, but then we just walk away from you and we have a beer with our friends because they're relatable. We can relate with them. And you, Adam, are like this perfect shiny suit of armor. There's just no way in. There's no access to any part of you. There's no vulnerability, no intimacy, no authenticity. And that was like the start, really, of my journey. I shouldn't say that because I feel our journey has to begin by like, we're these beautiful open beings. And then the world kind of trains us like, you better develop some armor and clothes in these areas. That was the point where I'd kind of developed enough of the armor and now I was ready to learn how to set it down so I could choose when to put that armor on and off. So let me pause and just check in. Is this sort of what you're wanting me to speak to, Nicole?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
It's very, very speaks to the journey of my own journey and that of the Secret Witch as well, I suspect. So
yeah. So let me just kind of draw it to a bit of an end then. They pointed to that. And then the other thing they pointed to was they said, Adam, you can leave here today. You don't have to do any work with us and you're still going to be a leader. The set of qualities you bring into the space, even the sound of your voice, all of that stuff, we kind of look to you for leadership. It's innate and you look to step up into it. However, you will forever be a leader of followers. And if you're willing to let us in to make a difference with you, we're going to do the work with you no matter what, but you have to be the one to let us in. You are too sophisticated. You can keep us out. You can fool us into thinking we're making a difference and not letting us have that impact. If you're willing to do that work and let us in, you're on this planet to be a leader of leaders. And so at the end of this first weekend of what would become a year of really intense training and work, I drove back up to my brother's where I was staying, 4-hour drive, and I cried for 4 hours. And I didn't cry because I was sad. I cried because for the first time in 30 plus years, my heart was opened and I was blown away by it. And so that really was the first crack in the armor that allowed me to start to even conceive of concepts like a spiritual truth as opposed to an intellectual one, because I had mastered living life from my intellect. It was clean, ordered, and boring.
I really, really love all of that. I really feel all of that actually as you shared that. I was like, oh yes, I can really feel that. So thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So yeah, again, the Secret Witch will really resonate with this idea of truth. And I guess where to go with that? It feels like this obviously your work that you have shared with the world since then is all about really distilling our true essence. So I wonder if we can go there and speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. Is there any particular, do you want me to just kind of give a broad overview of that notion of speaking to essence? Would that be helpful?
Yes, because I suspect that most people listening aren't familiar with your work, so it would be helpful for you to share what you have created.
Great. And I really, at this point, I really want to credit my lineage. So that ability to see into someone's soul, to speak their essence into space, it's not mine created net new. That is from the people that the masters I learned from. So those people I described with a group called Accomplishment Coaching, they gave me so much of that. What I've done is kind of simply refined that work, as do we all, right? We learn from our lineage and then we bring our own medicine into it. So just want to make sure I'm crediting the giants on whose shoulders I stand. So the core of this concept of someone's essence is that fundamentally at the heart of every human being is a set of ways of being. That sounds a bit jargony the way I just said it. So let's see if we can fix that. So what that means is like some of us bring naturally into every space we enter this experience for people of wisdom. Other people naturally, I'm one of these people, bring into the space wit with them, or brilliance, or connection, or love, or generosity. And every human being, the beautiful thing is we have the capacity for all of these qualities, but we kind of have strong suits, just like all of us have hair, but our hair parts at different places along our head. So it's not like, oh, I don't get to be love in the space. Sure you do. But for me, I'm naturally drawn more to creating connection with other humans than I am to being generous. It's not that I don't want to be generous. It's just that if I am in a space, all of my attention inevitably turns towards connecting. And so that kind of trait, that experience you have with me, when Adam Quiney comes into the room becomes more connected. So I'm talking to people more, but other people around me start to talk to each other more, just by virtue of how I enter, how I show up. The beautiful thing is every single one of us has these qualities. And the thing about them that is so interesting is it's like a beautiful colored light bulb that sits right back here behind our head. And it shines our own unique kind of color. Mine's kind of this sweet blue color. What color would yours be, Nicole?
Ooh, I think it's like purple.
Oh, good call. Yeah. Excellent choice of light bulb color, Nicole. Yeah. So when you and I enter the room, people are like, oh, the room just got a little more blue or a little more purple. Isn't that neat? Or isn't that whatever their experience is, right? They can sometimes have, oh, the room's too purple now, whatever. But they notice when you enter the room becomes more purple. And when you leave the room, they go, oh, the room just got a little less purple. They get the experience of being in the room when you're not and seeing the difference your presence has when you come and go. You never get that. From the moment you were born until the moment you pass on, your light bulb is shining its beautiful color into the world. And so it's the thing you see the world through. And consequently, while all of us radiate these beautiful qualities into the world, we are terrible at seeing them, at distinguishing them for ourselves, because it's just always there. And so this is part of what's fascinating to me in this is we can see kind of the soul, the spirit, the essence of someone else. We can't really see our own. At best, we can see it reflected in the world around us.
Oh my goodness, that just feels so profound. I was going to ask you, why is it that we find it so difficult to discover our own essence? So that's just perfectly summed up the exact reason, but that's like the most beautiful metaphor. I love that. That makes perfect sense. So yeah, and the work that I've done myself with distilling my essence has been really, really powerful. And I think one of the most powerful things about it for me was the using it as a tool to illuminate more about how we can show up from fear in these essences. So I don't know whether you can talk to that and how just even seeing that can really help us to embody new ways of being.
Well, I'm very, my relationship with my own fear goes deep. I've got a long lasting relationship with them. So I'm happy to talk about fear and how it shows up with this. So let's see, how do we want to walk into this? It would be lovely if the story began and ended with like, we're these beautiful qualities, the end. And then we just go but that would also be, if that were the case, we would never be able to discern between like, oh, the gifts we bring into the world and the rest of life. And so what starts to happen is we come onto this planet, this beautiful being, this little baby that people in airlines always book one seat in front of me. And babies are just expressed as themselves. And somewhere along the way, they get training from the world that what is natural and innate for them is not okay. And that training can come a million different ways. It can come from abuse, but it can also come from like the baby feels joy, laughs joyously at something that happened, like their mom dropped a glass of milk on the floor. The mom is having a hard day, gets frustrated, and her energy closes to the baby. And the baby learns in that moment, subtly and unconsciously, ooh, the natural joy I am is not okay in situations like this one. So that's where you could think of it like a split from our soul. You could think of it just like a bit of trauma with maybe a lowercase t. Sometimes it can be a capital T if it's more abusive or whatever. But whatever we call it in that moment, and every moment like that moment going forward, we learn what's innate and natural for me is not quite all right. And something needs to be done about that. And so in those situations, we tend to learn one of two, I guess we could call them lessons. The first lesson is who you are is too much. So, for example, growing up, well, not growing up, who I am, I take up a lot of space. I'm a big presence in the room. That can be a delight. It can also be too much. And I was raised by parents who also cast a big presence in the room, but they had been trained growing up to be modest. My mom was raised in a rural farming town by a preacher, so very modest. My dad grew up in England in 1943, he was born. So right at the tail end of the war, this isn't the time for big raucous stuff. We are rebuilding, we are healing, be quiet, be calm. And so a lot of the training I got from these two well-meaning parents was, Adam, stop showing off. You're being too much. Quiet, quiet, quiet. And so I learned, oh, the natural presence I am in the space is too much. I need to dim that light. So that's an example where I learned in situations that look like that training to turn my energy down, turn my light down, be less than I am. Is this making sense so far, Nicole? Okay, great. Please interrupt if you got questions or if you're like, hey, can we look at this? So the flip side to this is where I learned, oh, who I am naturally is not enough. So for example, another quality I bring into the space is brilliance. My brain has got a lot of fast twitch muscle fiber. I like thinking things through. I'm good at pulling things apart and explaining them to people. And going to school, I felt a lot of pressure from my parents to get good grades. And so naturally, I would just do well on tests. Maybe I'd get an A or something. And I'd come home, my parents would be like, that's great, but make sure you keep studying because an A+ is available. And so I learned in that situation, oh, I guess what's natural for me isn't enough. So I need to turn up the volume. I need to overexpress what's innate for me. So now what we end up with is we have the overexpression of what's natural for us and the underexpression. And this is what our fear uses. These are the tools of our fear. So every time we find ourselves in a situation where we're afraid that we might be too much, we turn ourselves down. And every time we're in a situation we're afraid we might be not enough, we turn ourselves up, which is a little bit, just so that we can see kind of the cosmic ridiculousness of this. It's like if my dog somehow got it into his head that he was not doggy enough and then started showing up like really working to convince me he's a dog. I'd be like, Grimby, that's ridiculous. You're a dog. Like, what are you doing? So in that example, we're like, oh, that's crazy. What we don't see is every human being is engaged in this. We're actively trying to convince people that we are smart or that we are funny or that blah, 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 blah. And all of that is a function of our fear, trying to keep us safe and trying to deal with the trauma, lowercase t, of those moments that were created so long ago. And our life kind of becomes a function, an expression of managing those moments.
That is just such a clear way to describe it. And ultimately what we're talking about is shadow and kind of the shadow poles that are at each kind of end of our essence, I guess. But I loved how you described this in your bio, because you put from love, Adam is connection, passion, presence, wit, and brilliance. From fear, he's awkward, robotic, apathetic, irrelevant, and arrogant. And I just love that because it just so clearly spoke to, how we can show up from love in this like beautiful, just full expression of ourselves, and then also how we can show up so easily from fear, from shadow. So
Yes.
I was then like, oh, what's mine? Like, and I came up with from Nicole, from love, Nicole is leader, joy, spirit, brilliance, and radiance. From fear, she's tyrant, Eeyore, bypassy, supercilious, and secret.
Oh, fantastic.
So,
What was the last one? Did you say secrets?
Secret, yeah.
Nice. Keep it all inside.
Yes, hide away from shining.
So get that.
Yeah. Hence the secret witch. Yeah. So I loved how you presented that, and felt like it would be really gorgeous to share, because I think it'll speak to a lot of people, especially some of my clients who obviously have their own essence distilled.
Yes.
I'm wondering if we could go to speak to some of the kind of main, if we think about the witch. There are obviously some core essences that show up in the witch. So I was just wondering if we could explore some of those, and just how they might show up in both kind of full beautiful expression and also from shadow. Because I think so if we just go with 5 main ones, that would be really powerful, because I think the listeners at home can then kind of get a grounding for how this can show up for them. So maybe kind of distilling like magic, or like power is another one, I think. Love, brilliance, radiance, things like that.
So we start at the top, and then we can start to work our way in. If we want to veer, we veer. Okay, cool. So first, let's distinguish just what is the essence of magic. And so to me, and I want to be clear, the deeper people go into this particular kind of work we're talking about, which is really the alchemy of the soul. By the way, I didn't know that's what those words were. They just came, I opened my mouth and words shot out, and it was like, it's the alchemy of the soul, obviously.
I love that.
Great, let's go along with it. Yeah, totally. That's magic in the moment right there, right? We're trusting what's coming forward. So the more we go into this, it's less like, oh, Adam said magic is this, therefore that's what it is. It's something each of us has the capacity to distinguish and distill and speak to. We just long ago forgotten that we had that ability, which is the heart of the secret witch. Often it's secret even from ourselves. We just don't realize that we've been this all along. So even though I'm going to now distill magic and maybe have you help me, for everyone, this is a little bit like being a sommelier for wine, where it doesn't matter that I taste tobacco in that wine. What do you taste, and what is there on your palate? And that's the magic of it. So magic would be the quality where someone kind of has, there's a knowing that they're plugged into below the level of what is rational. They often just feel like, I know this is the path to take. I can just feel it. And when they do, it seems to work out, and things just seem to happen around them. People with the quality of magic, my wife is one of these people. It can be frustrating at times because the world wants a rational explanation. And my wife, Bay, she'll create clients without trying. She doesn't have like here's the flow chart and the Gantt chart, and I do this and then that and then that. Instead, it's just like, I went to Disney World and then 2 clients hired me. You can't put that in a Gantt chart, right? Yeah, same. And so that's the essence of magic. Now, what happens is the world is set up. The world we live in is kind of it's an expression of the intellect. And the intellect is a tool. It's not exclusively the tool of our fear, but often it's the tool most used by our fear to ensure we don't have to trust. Because if trust leaves you open to being betrayed, to things falling apart. So we've got this world that's set up to be very predictable, rational. This makes sense. That leads to that. That leads to that. And so that's going to become in conflict with magic, because magic is not necessarily rational, right? It's go to Disney World, create 2 clients. And so what happens for people with this quality is, growing up, they learn one of 2 things. The first thing they learn is, oh, that innate knowing you have, don't trust that. Bung everything into this flow chart. Put yourself into the world of math exclusively. Again, not making math bad. It has a role. It's just, if we make it the only game in town, we've lost a whole bunch of stuff. So one place people can go when who they truly are is magic is they become hyper rational. That's a little bit like the path I followed. Even though I'm a man deeply enmeshed in spirit, I learned, no, screw spirit, math, predictability. I know the way out. I can derive the answer. I know where my feet are on the ground. So ironically, I would say a lot of people that have that secret witch in them who are magic and might even be listening to this might be like, well, that's not me. I'm not like one of those people. Who I am is hyper rational. And I would say who you've learned to be to stay safe is hyper rational, but who you probably actually are is the embodiment of magic.
Yeah, gorgeous.
The other place that people like this can get is because they notice that the magic they are innately comes into conflict with the world that wants rationality, they become escapist, like Peter Pan. So they're like, screw you, world, trying to put a lid on my magic. Never will that happen. And they run off to Never Neverland. And so these people are a bit like an unmanned fire hose. It's not that rationality is bad. In fact, structure, like having a calendar, you and I are talking because we put something in our calendar that serves us.
Yeah.
Right. A magic spell has an incantation. It has a gesture you have to make with a wand or like a ritual you have to do. And all of these are forms of structure. So the other side of the magic, when it's taken over by fear, is sort of like an inability to sit still and let any of that happen because it feels like an imposition of control and it'll take away our magic. So it's the sort of integration of those two parts that really leads to this full expression and ownership of the magic that witches are. That sounded as I was speaking, a little bit long. So guide us. How do you want us to do with the rest of these?
Yeah, we can touch on them more briefly, but that was, I think, a really great example of how this can be really really powerful work to really distill what our soul's gold is and what our essence is. It just and often in my experience we kind of distill that and we'll kind of swing between the two, often between that kind of intellect and Peter Pan if you like, as we're trying to integrate it. But yeah, I think that's definitely a pattern that the secret witch will be familiar with. I think another word is power that comes to mind, because that's obviously one of the biggest gifts of the witch as well. Magic and power, really the big ones. But
yes.
So yeah, I think power could be a good one to explore.
Great, let's play with that. So, well, let's have you take a turn. So, how would you describe power? Like, if you were to distill that, what would you say that is?
Yeah, it's interesting. The way I see power now, I think there's a cultural seeing of power, which is like this very kind of masculine force control way of being. And actually, I'd say leader is more my essence than power. I don't know, although actually I'm just redoing it at the moment, and some people did say power, so maybe we'll shift. But yeah, it's to me, and I can see the kind of the shadowy ways of being in my leader is that kind of either being very tyrant, very like dominating when I'm in shadow, versus being completely helpless, like I can't do this is so I don't know about power, but for me that's definitely how I show up in leader. Whereas when I am really in my truthful leadership is kind of when when I can just be power from love.
Yes, I think you did a beautiful job, like distinguishing that. I'll add, the part I'll add will be like more of a general thing for people that are kind of like, but why, if you're saying this about me, why am I this way? So our fear, it does something really ironic. It takes the gift we are, and then it pushes us to an underexpression of it or an overexpression of it. And so people that are the quality of, say, integrity, often have this experience of themselves being like the least in integrity people in the world. And the beautiful thing about that is, simultaneous to that, they're also the most broken up about that fact. People that aren't the quality of integrity don't tend to worry too much about whether they're in or out of integrity. It's just not an occurrence. They worry about being stupid if they're brilliant, or being selfish if they're generous. So the thing we're most afraid of being is kind of like the opposite of who we truly are. And so as you were describing power, you were sort of talking about like that pulling back, not feeling powerful, feeling weak. And to me, that's such a great compass point, pointing us towards your true north, which is like, who Nicole brings into the space is leadership, power. The other thing I want to add, because I loved how you described it's not necessarily that masculine, forceful power. And some of the I guess I'll call them metaphors that speak to power for me, are the way a river carves away rock, but it does so over millennia, or like grass growing through concrete. Like these are forms of power, but they are not, a hammer smashing a rock. And so when we start to describe these qualities, people can get locked into this idea like this is the way that looks, and that's not who I am, as opposed to seeing like a concept, a quality of being like power is infinite in its expression, which is what makes this so incredibly powerful, this work. So we're like, oh, because I'm generous doesn't mean I have to give a gift every Christmas. There's an infinite number of ways for me to express that gift that I am on this planet. Cool. Now I can start to play with that.
Gorgeous. Yeah, I love that. And actually, when you were talking about it being almost like it's missing because, I think one of the bit about it being like so obvious because it's who we are. So obviously missing because it's who we are, if that makes sense. That was something I saw very much with joy, because joy is also part of my essence. And it was like, I must be joyful because I was missing it, if that makes sense. So it was joy. Anyway, yes. It was certainly a part of my essence. And I can't remember now which bit it was, but I think it was joy. Because yes, it was, because I think to start with, joy felt so edgy. I chose play instead.
Yes. Yeah. Usually when we distill these 5, again, people are infinite in their qualities. 5 is a good number. It gives you not too many to think about. It gives you enough that you've got some variety to play in. But often when we distill down to 5 kind of qualities of being, people are really empowered by like a couple of them. There's a couple they're like, yeah, I can kind of see that. And then there's usually like one where they're like, I don't know about that one, coach, or Adam, or Witch, or whatever. Like, I'm not so sure about that one. It's like, oh, that's the one where they're the most I guess I'll use the word like divorced, or the most disempowered around that part of who they are innately. There's a lot of healing that can happen in that particular area.
Yeah, gorgeous. That makes, I love that. And that was so true for me. I'm just wondering, I don't want to spend too much time on distilling these because there's so much to dive into. But I think Radiance would be a good one. And possibly Brilliance, because I see those show up time and time again in the Witch, hence her hiding, really.
We'll do them fairly quick. Radiance is a great one because it's really poorly understood. I don't know if that's even the right word, but like, so Radiance, and in a man I would use the word presence, but they're the same quality. It's the quality celebrities have it. It's the quality in someone that draws our attention. When they enter the room, we're like, whoa, who is that person? And that can often mean that they're good looking, but that doesn't have to mean they're attractive. Adam Driver, who played Kylo Ren in Star Wars and has been in Girls and a ton of other stuff, he is not a traditionally attractive man, and yet the dude's got presence and we want to look at him. There's something about this guy's weird, muggy kind of face that I can't look away from. And so that's the quality of presence. Now, what we do in society is we view the world the way we view icebergs on top of water. So we don't see the 90% of depth that's there. We just see the 10% that immediately presents itself to us. And so what happens is we see presence or radiance. We relate to it as, oh, that person's pretty. And then we have no awareness that there's so much more to what's happening that has our eyes drawn there. And then we resent them for being pretty when we are not. And then all of it falls away. And where that leaves people with this quality is ashamed a little bit, like kind of schizophrenic about their gift. Like, wow, I want people to notice me. Because if you are the quality of presence, of course you would want people to notice you. That's a reflection of what you are. You're on this planet to be seen, to have an impact. So we want people's attention on us. And at the same time, we feel that it's wrong that we want that. That means I'm arrogant or vain or whatever. And so from that training, we become very push and pull about our gift. We steal the spotlight and then simultaneously run away from it, which presents people with a very confusing message. They're like, does Adam want to be on stage or not? Or is he just being a jerk and not letting other people have the spotlight? What's the deal? The deal is that what they're feeling is the expression of my own internal conflict, which is I really want people to see me, to notice me, to feel my impact. And I'm ashamed of that. And I don't know how to reconcile these two things. And so the shaman, the medicine man, the witch, the coach, the leader, these are all people with often a lot of radiance and presence because they have a big impact in the world. And part of our healing comes from learning that it's okay to have that impact, and also learning that it's okay to not always have that impact. Because one of the other things that can happen is we become terrified of not being as impactful as we want.
Ooh,
and then we
yeah.
steal the air, we steal the light, right? So these are the sort of people where you go to dinner and it's just a one-person show. You're like, wow, this Adam guy's entertaining, but I'd sure like to tell my story. And he's never shutting up. And so it's finding it's the transcendence away from I'm ashamed of being seen in the light, or I absolutely have to be seen in the light, to like, as we embody these qualities more, it stops even being about like, I need people to see me. And instead, the gift we become for the space is people are seen, myself included.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think that will really resonate with the secret witch, who often really keeps herself hidden. Beautiful. So I think that there's so much more we could go into there, but I think those are the main ones that will really speak to the witch. So thank you for that. There's I'd like to spend some time just exploring what you were talking about right at the beginning before we actually started recording. So I don't know whether that's a good place to go into that. Yeah. What do you?
I bet it is. I bet it is, because we just decided to.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we created it that way. Exactly.
That's right. Yeah.
Nice reminder.
So can you cue me just so I have a sense of where to start from?
You were just sharing about, I think you can share all of it really. Just there was a bit that you were sharing about you being a medicine man, which
which is edgy for me to speak to. And I'll speak to that edginess too. So
it's interesting because I've literally just finished running Invoke Your Medicine Woman. So it's kind of timely. So
beautiful. Yeah, it's perfect. So part of my journey has been, so first of all, the medicine I've been taking in my own life, and I never referred to it this way up until recently, has been transformational coaching. So I've worked with a coach for over a decade, multiple coaches, but like in particular, one who does this kind of work we're describing, like seeing my essence, the spirit of who Adam is, supporting me to discern when I'm hooked into my fear as opposed to like really aligned with my path, and learning to trust what I feel, as well as to trust when I have someone tap me on the shoulder and go, hey, you're a little bit too far to the left on the path. Just come back over to the center. That's as much a part of trust as anything, as opposed to like, I trust myself, I don't need anyone's input. That's not trust. That's fragility.
I love that. Yeah, I really love that. So resonate with that.
Yeah. So in the early days of that work, a lot of my work was sort of, how do I create clients? How do I have a successful business? You know, it was more in the realm of, I don't want to belittle it, but I'll call it like the facilitative or the mundane a little bit, right? Like, how do I survive? How do I get by? How do I be successful? As that work has progressed, my work with her has become more and more spiritual in nature. And sort of like in the early days, I might be concerned about, you know, I feel that I'm really right and my friend's really wrong. And how do I be friends with them in spite of that? And then over time, a lot of our conversations have been sort of supporting me to let go of even the notion of right or wrong, as though there is even such a thing, as though there's this objective idea that something is right and something is wrong. And it starts to get a little more esoteric. Anyhow, as part of what's been coming forward for me as I've done that work, been called more and more into plant medicine, and specifically to work with ayahuasca. And so 2 years ago, I went and sat in ceremony, the first of 4 ceremonies back then. And by the end of the work with her, she was like, hey, see all these shamans doing what they're doing? That's what's next for your work. And I was like, what do I do with that? I could feel the truth on some level. And at the same time, I was like, but I love what I do. I love my work as a coach. I love where I live in Victoria. I love, you know, the clothes I get to wear. I love all how life is. What do I do with this? And so what I was presented with was possibility, meaning I could see some real truth, some real possibility, some real exciting next stepness into my life. And possibility always shows up in partnership Just making sure my dog's not throwing up on my floor. Looks all right. Hear it? So possibility always shows up in equal and opposite countermeasure to fear, because to step into possibility is to step into the unknown, and the unknown evokes our fear. So what happened from my fear was I was like, I'm freaked out about this. I'm kind of thrilled by it. What do I need to do? And I did. Some of us run away from our fear, bury our head in the sand, bury that idea. I ran towards it, sort of like trying to close your eyes and run off the diving board so you don't have to be with your fear as you walk up to it, see the drop, take the scary step. So I came home and I Googled, like, how do you become a shaman? Where do I buy those feathers? What do all of this sort of stuff. And then I calmed down and I got supported and worked with the shaman I was working at the time and with my coach, and sort of like breathed into this. And really the message I kept getting was, you don't have to do anything at all, Adam. Just trust the path. It's going to unfold for you anyhow. So there's nothing you need to force or make happen. Like a flower opening to the flower doesn't have to be like, but how do I open my petals? It just does. It's part of its design. And so that was 2 years ago. I sat in ceremony a year after that. And then I went back down to Costa Rica recently to sit in ceremony. I brought a client of mine to come and sit in ceremony with me, and which was a beautiful experience in and of itself, but I'll talk about that some other time. And so I sat in ceremony and I went into it, Nicole. I was thinking, okay, I went a little crazy last time, got a little enthusiastic. Let's just play it cool. I'm open to whatever, but I'm not going to run straight towards the thing. And what the medicine brought me again, and with even more clarity this time, was sort of the message like, Adam, you have been a medicine man now for a long, long time. You've been a medicine man for quite some time. And you are ready to start calling yourself that. And you are the medicine. So not only, it's not like there's medicine over here for you to grab and then bring to someone. You are the medicine. And
yeah,
I was like,
I love that.
What do I do with that? And again, that message was with me, like, you don't do anything. And nevertheless, the next day when we were sitting in ceremony again, I sat down in front of the shaman who was leading the ceremony for that night, a guy named Mitra from Colombia. And I sat down in front of Mitra and I introduced myself and I said, hey, this is what the medicine's telling me. I've only drunk ayahuasca like 12 times or so. And yet she's really clear. The message feels quite clear. Do you have any medicine for me in this moment? You know, what medicine do you have for me? And so he paused, and it's kind of funny. All these shaman, they call it using the technology of the plant. So he put a lump of tobacco in his mouth to evoke some deeper truth or whatever. And they sort of, it's like, it's almost like a baseball umpire in the States chewing a big lump of tobacco. He's going to moves it around his mouth. I sit kind of nervous. What's he going to say? Is he going to call me stupid for thinking this? And he says, he leans in and he says, being a medicine man does not necessarily mean being a shaman. There's many, many different kinds of medicine. And it also does not mean healing other people. What it's about is healing yourself, healing your soul, healing your relationship to your lineage and to nature. And as you do more and more of that, the rest naturally unfolds. There's nothing you have to do. And I was like, oh, wow, got it. Beautiful medicine he had for me, right? Just absolutely amazing. And I can imagine he had that medicine present for himself, probably because at some point that was part of his own medicine. Right? This is how this works, is like the medicine I have for other people is often just a reflection of my own journey. My clients are like, wow, how do you know this? I'm like, because I've been just as annoyed and frustrated and pissed off as you have been 2 years earlier in the exact same space. So first of all, that's, the edginess there for me is this idea like, who the fuck do I think I am? Calling myself a medicine man, or owning a truth like that, or wearing a poncho like I'm doing right now, and perhaps looking affected, but not caring because it feels true to me. That's all my fear. Trying to grab that deeper truth and shove it into the box called this makes sense rationally. That's what my fear is trying to do. If we can just shoehorn it into that box, then it'll be contained in the box, and then we can rationally, it'll all make sense. Here's why I'm wearing a poncho. Here's why the medicine said that, because you were feeling this in your body, because you'd had diarrhea the night before, because you ate bacon, because blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. Now we can all breathe. And instead, what I'm finding in my own journey, and I'm also finding, I think, a lot of secret witches and probably just a lot of people that are here to work with me, and I suspect also you, Nicole, there is a stirring in our chest or behind our intellect. And that stirring is the truth of our spirit. And it doesn't make a lot of rational sense. And the more we try to push it into rational sense, the harder it is to hear that voice. But that voice is always there and it's always speaking to us. And what I found is, looking back, every time I do the courageous thing, and it is not easy, but courageous thing of stepping past beyond my fear and saying yes to that voice, something beautiful beyond my wildest dreams comes into existence. So I've been sharing for a bit. I'm going to let you say words, but that's,
Yeah.
that sort of some of the experience I've been in.
That is just beautiful, and totally something that was, yeah, part of Medicine Woman was really, for me, like, again, I really resonate with that. It's so my own journey that I have been a medicine woman. It was kind of like an unconscious competence. And then I came to running Medicine Woman. I was like, I'm not a medicine woman.
Aha,
I was like, but
love it.
it was reflected back to me that no, you are, because yeah, just being you in your full truth and your fullest expression, which is what you were speaking to there, I think,
Yes.
is just such medicine for other people, who resonate and who are walking the same path. So yeah, I totally feel what you said there. One thing that stood out to me that was really interesting to me was you said there's nothing to do, and I just wanted to speak to that a little bit, because I think there's that tendency for me. I know as part of my own journey and part of most of the secret witches journeys is that there's the kind of spiritual ascension path, and so I always laugh at myself when somebody says there's nothing to do, because that was kind of my tagline. But the way that I took it when I was in that kind of ascension mode was like there's nothing to do, which had me just sit on my bum doing nothing.
Yes. Aha.
So I think, yeah, I was just curious in your own views on that, because it very much feels like your work is grounded in being human and distilling our soul's essence, as well as taking those nudges from spirit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about this. So thanks for that. Um, so there is, yeah, the one of the most misunderstood concepts in my experience right now is surrender, because it just sounds like a get out of jail free card. Like I
Right.
read Michael
Yeah.
Singer's surrender experiment. It's going to lay back with my hands on my head and the world will give me everything I desire. That's resignation. Resignation is distinct from surrender. So to surrender to what is not to give up what we're committed to. It's not to let go of the path we're on or all of the stuff we want to make happen. It's to do so in partnership with a complete and total acceptance of whatever happens along the way. And um, and so when the medicine tells me there's nothing you have to do, what she's really inviting me is like, let me just see if I can get my arms around this. There's a distinction between what I feel called to do and then what I feel urgently I have to or must or need to do. And so um, just to ground that in like some examples, what I feel called to do in my life is to continue to go and partake in plant medicine ceremony and to continue to do the deep, deep work I do with my coach. Those are non-negotiables for me at this point in my life. And I feel continually called to support people in unlocking and transforming and living in harmony with their essence, their spirit, through the coaching work, the medicine I bring into the world. All of that, absolutely, I'm still committed to doing. If we were to distinguish that from the urgent sort of fear-based, like, there's a bunch of stuff I have to do, that might look like me dropping everything I'm doing drastically. I mean, like, all there is for me to do is to move to Costa Rica and sit in ceremony every single night. That on some level wouldn't really be true for my spirit. And then the third thing that would not really be what there would be to do would be like, there's nothing to do. I'm going to stop all of the work I do as a coach. I'm going to stop all the leadership work I do. I'm just going to lay at home for the next 6 months. I've got the money. I can afford to do that. You can do that. But what most people find is as they sit there doing nothing, they start to feel antsy. And then the irony is they try to force themselves to be still in the face of their antsiness instead of trusting like, there's actually like, I'm actually being called into something other than just laying on the couch. for 6 months.
Mm.
So there's kind of committed action in partnership with surrender as opposed to resignation or like attachment.
Yeah, I love how you've described that. And yeah, as my own soul guide calls it, it's kind of that taking of a soul aligned action, which
it's beautifully put.
Really speaks to what you're speaking about there. Gorgeous. I'm just thinking we've got some time left. I'm sure there was something else you said at the beginning. Or did I interrupt you there? Had you finished exploring what you were?
I had. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Good. That's all right then. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. So in terms of because really what we're talking about here is magical life creation. And I guess it's helpful to kind of ground the soul essence work into how that kind of then filters out into life, which we have been doing to an extent, but I wondered if there's anything you wanted to share on that.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I'd share is like when I first started into this work, the notion, like kind of the, the first distinction, in the Bible, God created, I'll get it wrong, but I think it was dark and then he created light. That's like the first distinction. And in this work we're talking about, the first distinction is kind of distinguishing our doing from our being. Like, what are you doing? And then who are you being underneath what you're doing? So the doing I can be engaged with is like making 100 sales calls because I want to make a client or I want to make a sale or whatever. You can give 2 people this algorithm, make 100 sales calls and say this script as you talk to them. And underneath that, who they're being, one person can be being, I'm an embarrassment, I'm going to fail, and I'm a tedious interruption in the people I'm calling today. And the other person who they're being can be like, I've got something of real value and I'm really serving these people. And it may take them a moment to get that, but I'm clear that I'm serving them. And you could have those people do the exact same thing, but who they're being is going to be determinative of the results they get. It underlies everything. So that's the distinction of doing and being. And when I started in this work, I had zero capacity to even appreciate any of that. It just sounded like so much bullshit to me. But there was a part of my soul, there was a part of my heart that I was at least to some extent engaged with, that I yearned for something that I could tell just the concept of doing wasn't going to get me. Like I could hire another 1 million people to tell me what to do. I could read another 58,000 books on personal development, and I can tell it's not going to get me where I want to get me to. And I guess what I want to say here is I want to invite everyone to have a tremendous amount of grace, forgiveness, love, and kindness with themselves as they start to work with this stuff, because it's easy to, we've been having a fairly high level conversation. You and I would say, Nicole, are fairly far ahead in this work, but all of us have an edge that we're all at in the moment, and wherever our edge is perfect. And if you go to the gym and the current level of weight you can lift is 2 pounds, that's perfect. And it's easy to be, look at that person over there lifting 50-pound weights. They're huge. I should look like that. But that's not true, because where we are is the 2-pound weight. And so wherever people find their struggle is, wherever people find their current capacity is, that's a beautiful place. And the more gracious, loving, and kind we can be with ourselves exactly where we are, the easier it is for us to unfold. A lot of the time, how we are, if we imagine ourselves as flowers opening towards the light, when we don't open the way we think we should, it's like we're sitting at a flower and screaming at it, open. And that's not how a flower opens. It's not how it works. So we really want to be loving and gentle with ourselves because wherever we are is perfect.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm really glad that you shared that, actually. So it's so important to come to this journey with love, and I know that from the work that I have also been in. Yeah, I think some of the listeners may well be loving this, but also wondering how they begin to even kind of deepen themselves into this work. So do you have anything to say to that?
Yeah. There's a few ways. Like, first is it's always helpful to follow people follow Nicole, follow myself, follow people that are engaged with their own medicine. So that's the key. Is so much of social media is rife with people that they're getting the notion of coaching, medicine work, leadership, they're getting it wrong innocently. They're getting it innocently wrong, but they're buying into what the world at large is selling us, which is learn something at school once and then go sell it to the world, whether it's a service you offer or a product you make. That's not how the soul's journey works. The soul's journey is never ending, and forever we are in it. The ceremony never ends. So the people that are most valuable, I think, to follow as a starting point are people that like are engaged in work with their own coach, their own soul guide, their own spirit journey, their own shamans, their own medicine. That's what you want to look for, is like, are these people taking their own medicine? And people that are just, there is something magnetic and undefinable, and yet at the same time, like indisputable about them, where we're just like, I don't know what it is, but there's something powerful in the presence of this person, and I want to be with that. So spend time with those people, watch their videos, listen to their podcasts, do that sort of stuff. The second option, when people are ready, is to like engage with those people at a deeper level. And the start of that engagement is just a conversation. And I find most people, I'd imagine you'd be the case, Nicole, and it's certainly the case for me. Anytime someone reaches out to me and says, can I have a conversation? The answer is yes. The vast majority don't, because it's scary, right? It's edgy. What is Adam going to say to me? What is he going to see? What is he going to reflect to me? Probably nothing. I'm probably just going to find you awesome because you don't know it yet, but you are. So that's like the first stage, is just to get engaged in some kind of conversation. And then when you are ready, and we all have our own tempo that unfolds into this, start to work with those people. Hire Nicole, hire Adam, not to give them money, but because the transference of money is an energetic exchange, and it is an act of committance. We commit to something when we put money into it. And when we commit to something, only really then can the transfer really start to happen. So it's not about hiring someone to pay them. You don't have to worry about that. It's more like, that's an act of you, in a way, almost your soul is saying, I'm choosing into this. I'm fully into this.
I absolutely love what you've just shared there, because it's such my own experience. You know, when I've devoted to things, so much magic has unfolded. And back when I first started this journey, that was such a resistance for me. So I just love that you present that, because I see it happening time and time again for my own clients as well. It's quite magical, the act of devotion to the woman that we, or the man that we've come here to be. Going back to the being in the world.
Yes.
Our soul's essence. Yeah, it really feels, I'm glad you present that.
It's miraculous. And again, right, our intellectual mind can't always get its hands around it. So there's a degree where we're like, boy, I can kind of feel that it might be time. And then our mind's going to be like, but hold on, let me think about all these thoughts. And then we have to sort of like, let that do what it does. But the spirit knows, it can tell you when it's time.
Yeah, I think myself and my soul guide laughed at this, because there was a story that I had that it was all a scam. Magic was all a scam.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, really?
Same. Yeah, that. Absolutely. Yeah. Lawyer, right? Of course.
Yeah. But it did make us chuckle at that, because I've just got this radical honesty where I'll just say, are you scamming me? So yeah, so it is a big fear. It's a big fear for many secret witches and lots of other people as well. So beautiful to just witness that, I think.
Yes. Yeah. And sacred to own it in ourselves. Like, the fact that you owned, I'm afraid this is a scam. You didn't necessarily use those words, but there's such freedom in that, because then we can look at the fear. What most fear does is, I'm afraid this is a scam. I don't want to share that with this person, because then they're going to use it against me. I'm going to hold that here close to my chest. And then now we're trapped in it. We can't move beyond it.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. And that is, exactly how the alchemy was created there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gorgeous. In terms of, had you finished answering that question? Sorry, I feel like I interrupted you again.
Yeah, well, I guess the last thing I would say is that people can get caught in an all or nothing kind of approach. Like, the only way that there is for me to do this work is to spend $100,000 and hire this person I'm really resonating with. That's not true. There's a million different ways. And what I always find most inspiring is when people come to me and they're like, not that, I can't pay that. but I'm really committed to doing work with you. How can we make it happen? And then we can dance and our spirits can dance together and create some kind of beautiful partnership. Those are the people that always take off. Most of us are scared to do that because we're scared of being told no or any of that. So there's always a way. There's always a way. And it always starts with a conversation.
Yeah, I
Now I'm
love
done.
that. I love that. And also I love that you said about dancing, because that's exactly how I often do dance in devotion to my secret witches, actually, for that very reason.
Mm,
So
so great. I
like
love it.
physically in my body
Yeah,
dancing. Yeah, beautiful. Gorgeous. That is, yeah, this is amazing, this conversation. So yeah, okay. So you are creating all of this into a book. I'd love to hear more about that if you've got anything to share on
totally.
that.
Yeah. So the whole thing we've been talking about, the Greeks called it ontology, the study of being, the science of being. I just use that word because it makes me sound kind of smart. Prove I'm brilliant. But ontology, for the most part, has been sort of this, the way you'd learn about it is you'd go sit with someone and then they would work with you ontologically, meaning they're not laying it out so that you can kind of understand it conceptually. They're just like, great, who Adam's being is trying to convince me that he's brilliant. Instead of just trusting that's who he is, I'm going to work with that. And so this book that is, here's the cover. It's called Who Do You Think You Are? Look at that. Yeah, a little beautiful picture inside someone's head. A leader's guide to what the mirror doesn't show you. So it's couched in leadership, but it's not just leadership, of course, as people are getting. The idea is to demystify this work without removing its mystery. We can't remove its mystery, but really to create a bridge so that our rational brain can kind of get a little bit of its hands around it and use it a little bit, but not take away all of the deeper spiritual truth that's there. And so it lays out this whole kind of approach. Why is it that we have a spiritual essence? What, like, kind of answers some of that stuff, articulates 25 common qualities of being. I think it's 25. Sort of like a sommelier would be like, wine can taste like this or this. So it's designed to help you start to get a palate for people's essence. And then the last third of the book is ways to work with this sort of stuff. So like if you are stuck in the emotional quality of anger, here's how you would move that through your body. Here's how you work with that. So it's going to be amazing. I'm really excited about it. Who do you think you are? And if people want to, follow it or see when it comes out, following me on Facebook or something like that's usually the best way. I'm going to be shouting about it everywhere. So
Yeah, well, me too, do share.
Uh,
Yeah, that's gorgeous. Do you have any idea when it's coming out, or?
yeah, so it's been a long project. I finished all of the editing, the proofreading, reviewing the proofreading, all that's done. So we're just in the layout phase. I'm estimating sometime in the next 2 months, it'll actually be like you can have it on your desk.
Wow.
And the vision I have for it is I've got a bunch of books by authors that I think are phenomenal, and I hate the way they look and they're shoved into a bookcase. This I envision as like a beautiful book that people can have on their desk, a bit like a reference. So it'll be available in hardcover. It'll have a nice, beautiful cover. It's got cool graphics and tabs throughout it. That's not how people have to have it, but aesthetics are fun. I like things to look beautiful. They make me feel good. So I want to, that's going to be available for people too, that really are like, boy, I want something beautiful on my desk.
Yeah, very radiant.
Yeah. Well said. Well seen.
Gorgeous. Well, I'm very excited for that. If people want to find out and follow you, like you say, where can people find you best? We'll put that in the show notes as well.
Yep, there's 3 places. So the first is my website, which is just my name, adamquiney.com, ADAMQUINEY.com. The second is on Facebook. I post a lot of my art there. And what I mean by my art is just the expression of who I am. So my writing goes there, a lot of my, whatever my art happens to be. So that's always a good place. I'm on all the other social medias too. I'm just most active on Facebook for whatever reason. And the third place would be my podcast, which is called Get Lit, which is a terrible title and probably should be changed. But if you search for Get Lit, Adam Quiney, you'll find it. And that is kind of taking the conversation we're in right now and casting it into the lens of transformational leadership. And so much of leadership in the world is like, being servant leader is right. You know, there's this obvious truth that gets posted as a meme on LinkedIn. And what we're doing in that podcast is like, here's why that's not always, we're taking the obvious truths and kind of flipping them on their head so people can see the deeper truth that gets stepped over when something's obvious. So,
oh, I love that. I didn't know that podcast, so I'm going to be researching that after.
Yeah,
after
it's great.
today. Amazing, gorgeous. Well,
there's two things I'll just share on that we do on there. Once a week is usually about a 20-minute episode, so they're nice and short. And then the other, every midway through the week, there's usually an episode that's either me coaching someone and demystifying what's happening. So here's what we're doing with this person. So people that want to learn to use this medicine can get better at it. Or it's me solo. Just most recently, the episode was all about the ayahuasca ceremony I sat in a couple of weeks ago. So if people are curious to hear more about that, that's up there. I think that's going live today or tomorrow. So
excellent. I'm going to be listening to that. Thank you, Adam. This has been, really, really, I've loved this conversation. So
me too.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. This has been a real treat.
Oh my goodness, I think that was one of my favourite conversations so far. Here are my takeaways. Fundamentally, at the heart of every human being is a set of ways of being. We each bring things naturally into the space, a bit like having a coloured light bulb behind our heads that has a unique colour, and in this we can see our soul, spirit or essence. As babies, we are just expressed as that essence, and then we learn that what is natural in us is not okay, and we split from our soul. It becomes somewhat of a minor trauma, and we learn that who we are is either too much or not enough. When we learn to split, we suppress who we are and express it as fear instead of love. We become secret witch instead of fully expressed witch without realising a soul essence is who we are. If we're feeling that split from soul, if we notice that something is missing from our essence, for example joy, it's because it's actually part of our essence to begin with. We can't miss something that wasn't there in the first place. There are polarities of these fearful expressions of our soul essence. For example, magic can be hyper-rational, or at the opposite end of the pole, it can show up as escapist, like Peter Pan. We tend to swing between both ends of the pole until we do the work to fully embody our soul's gold, our true essence, until we become our natural selves from love. When we do embody that soul's gold, it is magical. It's important to have a guide for this who can tap you on the shoulder and say, you're just a little bit too far to the left on the path, just come back to centre. Really, all of this deep work is the alchemy of our soul. If you'd like to get the show notes and links for everything we've chatted about in this episode, head to www.secretwitch.co.uk. If you know a secret witch who would love this episode, please share with them to help them liberate themselves. And so you don't miss out on next week's episode, head to your podcast app of choice and hit subscribe. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time.